won't be long, yeah, yeah, yeah. It won't be long, yeah, yeah, yeah. It won't be long, yeah, till I belong to you.
After the success of Please Please Me, the Beatles had officially arrived. With their second album with the Beatles, they would make sure that their popularity would continue to stay. Now, this album had much more time put into it, so will that mean it's better than their debut? Before we find out, let me introduce you to the new format of the reviews. Now, instead of just talking about the song as a whole, I'll go more into each song and its parts. So the format of each song slide should reflect this. I kept the personnel the same so you know what the contributions are from each of the Beatles, but I also added a highlight section which contains the best moment of the song in my opinion in 3 categories: vocally, instrumentally, and lyrically. Now, the lyrics are still a bit basic, so when I put the best line in, it might seem like I'm reaching, but remember, the Beatles it's only their second album. Regardless, this new format should make things a lot nicer for your viewing experience. But with all that said, let's get started. This is With the Beatles.
It won't be long, yeah, yeah, yeah. It won't be long, yeah, yeah, yeah. It won't be long, yeah, till I belong to you.
So we start off things by It Won't Be Long, which is a John Lennon composition. My favorite parts of the song were probably the call-in responses, which is basically when after a line is sung, by the lead singer of course, the other singers chime in. It's one of the most effective parts of the song because it makes the chorus incredibly catchy. My favorite part music-wise was that sweet guitar riff, which flowed perfectly along with Lennon's vocals. My favorite line was during the second verse. It's nothing poetic, but it conveys the emotion of the situation pretty well. For a beloved song though, is the song really that good? That's a rhetorical question. Of course it is. If you thought I Saw Her Standing There from the last album was a brilliant start, this one will really surprise you with how great it is. That early Beatles energy is just in full force here. It grabs you from the first line and just shakes you throughout the song, led by Lennon's outstanding vocal performance. He really picked up right where he left off from Twist and Shout, except this time he doesn't have a cold when he's recording it. Now, the song isn't anything complex, but just from how much fun of a song it is, it's impossible not to enjoy it. That's really the phrase here, pure fun. It's really just a solid start to the album.
Want you around, yeah. All I gotta do.
After the explosion of It Won't Be Long, we get a much slower track here with All I've Gotta Do, which is another John Lennon track. The vocal highlight here is definitely during the bridge when John Lennon starts with "The Same Goes For Me" and then sings amongst the harmonies. Musically, the bass playing by McCartney is clearly the achiever here. I read that it's one of the first songs to have bass chords as a vital part of the song. Now certainly the bass playing here is phenomenal. Lyric-wise, there wasn't really much that caught my attention, but I kinda went with the bridge again because it's really a nice shift towards talking about the girl to talking about the singer himself. The song itself is peculiar because it talks about calling someone, which was normal in the US, but it really wasn't a thing yet in England. It's interesting that Lennon wrote about something not common in his country and still made it seem like he'd done it before, when in reality, phones still weren't really a part of his life. Anyways, is this song good? I thought a bit about it, but I decided, yes, it's good. The biggest reason was because the style was quite different than the normal rock and roll the Beatles normally did. It's a lot slower, and after a song like It Won't Be Long, you'd think we'd get something at least a little bit faster. However, I think that Lennon's performance here is still quite good, especially in the bridge, and the musicianship itself is solid enough to really get this a pass. However, when taking their entire discography into account, this one would probably get buried down for most people, unless you really enjoy songs like this, and I'd also say A Taste of Honey, where the pace is slow. Now, it's not my favorite, but it certainly does work here.
Every day, and I'll send all my loving to you.
Next up is All My Loving, which is the first Paul McCartney composition on this album. The highlight vocally was definitely the outro, where McCartney sings the chords in a slightly higher register. The highlight musically is the rhythm guitar work, and man, it's really great here. John Lennon actually didn't sing harmonies on this song live because he was so focused on that rapid strumming pattern and chord changes. It's probably his best performance instrumentally in any Beatles song so far. Lyrically, I found the best line to actually be the first couple lines, just because it sets the stage so perfectly after that beginning drum intro. It's worth noting that this was the first song most Americans heard from the Beatles, because when the Beatles did their famous gig at the Ed Sullivan Show, which would be the most watched program in television history for a while, they started with this. Now, was the first song most Americans heard from the Beatles a good one? Absolutely. This one is a classic. I mean, how can it not be? The musicianship is exceptional, the vocals are great, and even the lyrics have their moments here and there. It's another song that I feel just captures that early Beatles energy and why Beatlemania was as crazy as it was. Even when the song changes a little from verse to chorus beat-wise, it still doesn't lose its place and keeps pounding away at us. Unlike a lot of other good songs so far, this song I think doesn't really get buried too much into their discography for the sole purpose of just its impact in Beatles history. Like I said, it was the first song that many Americans heard, and frankly, probably the best opener they could have started with.
Go away, leave me alone, don't bother me.
Well, folks, we finally have a George Harrison original, Don't Bother Me. The vocal highlight here was during the end of the chorus when Harrison's vocals peak. It's when he really sounds into it and hits some impressive notes for his range. Musically, I'd say the percussion here really stands out though. The drum fills are impressive and the beat to this song is definitely impossible to ignore. As for the lyrics, there really wasn't much to pick from, but I settled with the line that Harrison sings really well because it's probably the only line that really stood out to me. So is George Harrison's first track a good song or a dud? It's definitely a good song. Whether it's the downbeat attitude, the great percussion, or even Harrison's improved vocals, this song has a lot of things going for it. Sure, the hook isn't as good here as most other Beatles songs, but it does get a lot of things right, and unlike in Misery from the previous album, the song actually conveys the emotion that the singer's feeling, which is, in this case, downbeat and irritation. Now, it's not particularly memorable as a song on its own, especially when you compare it to the rest of the Beatles' discography, but for those who really enjoy George Harrison tracks, I think you would enjoy this one as his first attempt.
Little child, won't you dance with me? I'm so sad and lonely. Baby, take a chance with me.
Next, we have Little Child, the first Lennon-McCartney collaboration on this album. The highlights vocally are probably the verses, and especially at the end, where Lennon sings "Come On" pretty energetically to keep the pace going. Musically, the harmonica does make a large impact here, and is definitely the instrument I remember most from this track. As for the lyrics, well, I'll get to them in a little bit. So anyways, is the first collaboration good or bad? Well, it's bad. Yeah, I said it. It's a bad Beatles song. However, there are a lot of reasons for this. First are the lyrics, as I mentioned earlier. They are probably the biggest problem here because it's really the bare minimum you could possibly write because there are only a total of 6 distinct lines in the verses. Sure, the running time is only 1 minute 46 seconds, but it just comes across as repetitive in the end when you hear the chorus repeat the same lines for about 60% of the song. Also, going to that chorus, I'm not a big fan of how they worded it. Just look at it. Little child, won't you dance with me? I'm so sad and lonely. Baby, take a chance with me. That touch anyone? But in all seriousness, I think Lennon and McCartney were still in the beginning of becoming the writers we know as them today. And in fact, Lennon and McCartney themselves called this one a work song. So you could kind of tell that they weren't too fond of what they came up with here. However, it's not like the lyrics are offensively bad or anything, but compared to the other songs we've looked at so far, it's definitely underwhelming. Now, these guys did write songs like There's a Place, so I don't think it's unfair to expect them to at least come up with something better than this. Lyrics aside though, another problem with the song is that it's not memorable in the slightest. Yeah, the harmonica stands out and definitely has its moments, but I don't think the harmonica solo is really that great here. I mean, let me ask you this. If you've heard this song, what do you remember the most about it? Your answer is probably either the vocals or the harmonica, and really that's just it. There are only 2 memorable bits to me in this song. Now compare that to a song like All My Loving, and you can really talk about many things to like in that. You could love the rhythm guitar, the vocals, the guitar solo, the change in pace. I mean, it's a lot of stuff you can point to, but here, While Ringo, George, and Paul still do their jobs well, it's not exactly a performance that would stand out. If a Beatles song isn't memorable and doesn't have at least 3 areas where it stands out, then I think it's understandable why this one is bad. Now, I don't hate the song or anything like that, and as I mentioned, I really dig John Lennon's vocals here, so I'd understand if anyone would like this, but I personally just don't think that this song as a whole is really that strong. And it's also worth mentioning that Lennon and McCartney wrote this for Ringo Starr to sing. Yeah, when Lennon and McCartney write songs for others to sing, they generally won't end up being their strongest material, because if the songs are great, and they knew it was great, they would just sing it themselves. In fact, McCartney himself called the song an album filler. Yeah, when the artists themselves don't think too highly of their own song, it's not a good sign. Anyways, this one really just doesn't stand out.
But I never heard them ringing. No, I never heard them at all till there was you.
Next up, we have Till There Was You, the first cover on this album. I forgot to mention that covers don't have a lyrical highlight because they aren't written by any of the Beatles themselves. Anyways, the highlight vocally here was Paul McCartney mispronouncing saw as sar. I don't know if that's because it's a part of the song style or if McCartney really just doesn't know how to say saw properly, but regardless, I always found that pretty amusing. Now, the highlight musically is that lead guitar work, which is really fantastic throughout the song. It sets the stage in the beginning and just keeps on going throughout the song. So does this song get the album back on track? You bet it does. It's a good song. It's largely because of how great McCartney's vocals are here. They aren't the usual energetic rock and roll voice we come to expect from him. Instead, they're laid back and soft, but still make a huge impact and kind of fit in the song's nature. Paul is one of the most versatile singers, and I think he shows it off here. It's interesting how well the Beatles handle most of their covers, giving it their own unique flair to it. They do exactly that here, as this one really became a concert staple for obvious reasons. Sure, this one probably gets buried in the discography, but honestly I think it's a really neat hidden gem that hardcore Beatles fans definitely enjoy.
Oh yeah, check it and see, one more time for me, you gotta wait.
Side 1 is a cover of a song that I'm sure a lot of us have heard. Please, Mr. Postman. The highlight vocally is definitely that brilliant bit at the end. I said in the last song that the Beatles really add a unique touch to each song they cover, and in this case, I think they actually made the wait a minute part the catchiest part of the song. It's sung so well by Lennon, and the musicianship just complements it perfectly. In fact, musically, the hand claps are actually the highlight here, which is strange, but it's so effective. After the wait a minute section, the hand claps in Lennon's voice are the only things that can be heard for a couple of seconds, and then the hand claps just make a tremendous impact there. I'm not even going to ask that rhetorical question. The song is brilliant. It's a great cover by the Beatles, and I know that in terms of their entire discography, maybe this one won't stick out, but similar to There's a Place, this is certainly a neat hidden gem buried under hundreds of great songs. I think that vocally, it's the standout performance of the album. Whether it's John Lennon's amazing performance or the harmonies that are so effective, this one is really special.
Roll over Beethoven, I tell Tchaikovsky the news.
Side 2 begins with Roll Over Beethoven, which is a cover of a popular Chuck Berry song. Vocally, I think George Harrison actually has one of his best performances on these early records. His vocals are definitely best during the bridge, where they just flow very well at the guitar work. In fact, how about that guitar work? Considering that it's a Chuck Berry song, it's no surprise that the guitar work is really the highlight here. This one is easily good. I think this one really showcases the Beatles' ability of doing rock and roll covers. They played covers of songs for so many years in the cavern and the clubs that it's no surprise that these covers have all been pretty good. This one in particular is really carried by a mix of great guitar work and those great vocals I mentioned by Harrison. This song is basically showcasing his talents. It's a good song and definitely among the Beatles' best covers.
Feels alright, now hold me tight. Tell me I'm the only one. And then
We get back to original ones here, as now we have Paul McCartney's song Hold Me Tight. The first thing I'd like to point out here are the vocals. Now, John Lennon had a cold during the Please Please Me sessions, and here I think it's Paul McCartney who has one here. They really aren't his finest vocals, to put it nicely. Now, I don't know if McCartney had a cold, but it certainly sounds like it. His nostrils must have really been swallowed up. As a result, there's not really much I like about the vocal performance. On the contrast though, the bass work here is pretty exceptional. The lyrics are mediocre, but I did find that line during the bridge pretty funny just off how he worded it. So with the poor vocal performance, kinda mediocre lyrics, and pretty solid musicianship, does the song still manage to be good? Sadly no, it's simply just okay. Now it's not bad because despite McCartney's vocals not being among his best here, it's not like it ruins the song as bad as it could have. It could have definitely been much worse. And even though the lyrics are pretty simplistic, they aren't too much of a problem because like I said, they are kind of funny at times just based off how he worded it. However, this song is once again very forgettable. It's one of the few songs by the Beatles to get bashed by both Paul and John. That's not a good sign, and while this song does have its moments here and there, it really pales in comparison to the good tracks from this album.
You've really got a hold on me. You really got a hold on me. You really got a hold on me.
Another cover. This one is You Really Got a Hold on Me, which is one of Smokey Robinson's hits. Vocally, the harmonies here are really good. They make the verses the most impressive part of the song. Instrumentally, it was tough to pick a highlight because all the instrumentals really shine here. Percussion is cool when it changes during the part where they sing Hold Me, but the guitar work is definitely the highlight here, just the way it fuses with the piano in the intro, and then just carries on during the verses. This is yet another good cover, and it's actually one of their most impressive ones. Not only is the original version a soul song, making a rock and roll cover of it a bit more difficult since it's a completely different genre, but the Beatles here just pull it off as impressively as they could have. The nice piano intro played by George Martin just sets the stage perfectly, and the vocals, as I said, are done perfectly. The song is really just fantastic purely based off how it sounds, meaning that the guitars are great, the vocals are great, and it's just a joy to listen to. And it showcases how great the early Beatles sound was. They may not be the greatest songwriters just yet, but their sound is perfect. It's yet another great cover on this album.
I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man.
Now we're at Ringo Starr's song to sing, which is I Wanna Be Your Man. Now, interestingly, this was actually a Rolling Stones song first, which was still written by John and Paul because they wanted to show off how quickly they could write, while Mick Jagger and Keith Richards kind of watched them. Long story short, they gave it to the Rolling Stones, but decided to do their own take on it later on. The vocal highlight for me here are those screams by McCartney, which really sets the stage for the solo. And speaking of which, I really love that guitar solo. It's simplistic, but it's so effective amongst just the chaotic environment in this song. With a great guitar solo mixed by some fantastic screams by Paul, does the song manage to be good? Very difficult decision, but I'll say it is. Now the main reason is because of how good it sounds. Now Ringo's voice here is actually double tracked, which is pretty effective. Mixed with the great guitar work, and I think you have a formula for a great Beatles song. Why was it a difficult decision though? Because the lyrics are really not some of their best. Now look, I understand that Lennon and McCartney were starting off and improving, but they can definitely do better than having the title of the song be repeated 21 times. Even the verses have similar problems to Little Child, where there's really barely any difference between each verse. If the song didn't sound so great, it might have actually been a bad one. As it is though, it's rather low good song, but just purely based off how it sounds, it's definitely good.
She's got the devil in her heart, but her eyes they tantalize.
Next is Devil in Her Heart, making it cover number 5. Now the vocal highlight here are the harmonies, which really shine through during the verses. The best part has to be the guitar hook though, which is actually pretty relaxing. The guitar work in general is really brilliant here. So is this a good song? Absolutely. It's really refreshing hearing some good lyrics, even though it's actually just a cover. In fact, I didn't get to this, but the vocals are actually really clever. One guy, or George Harrison, sings about the girl being an angel, while the other, who is John Lennon, sings the opposite. In fact, this is actually George Harrison's third song singing lead vocals, which is a record that won't be matched for quite a while. He definitely does a great job here, along with those great harmonies I mentioned. The musicianship is probably the best part about this song. The guitar hook, as I mentioned, is great, but the percussion is also great, as it really changes around a bit. And really, it's just another fantastic sounding song.
you're back again. No, 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 not a second time.
We now get to the last original song on this album, which is Not a Second Time, a John Lennon composition. The highlight here vocally is actually John Lennon's performance during the chorus. I think he conveys the emotion of this song perfectly. The highlight musically is probably the piano work, which is actually played by George Martin. I'd have to say it's pretty dark, but it perfectly captures the effect of this song. For once, there's also a lyrical highlight in one of the verses. In fact, I think this is a pretty notable song lyrically, as it's one of the first of many John Lennon pessimistic songs that he would really master throughout his career. Was this first one, though, a good song? I'd say yes, this is a good song. It's a lot more intelligent lyrically and features yet another fantastic lead vocal performance from John Lennon. It's also supposedly complex musically, containing an Aeolian cadence, which happens near the end of the song. Basically, it's tricking you into thinking it's going to end major when it actually ends on minor. It doesn't make much of a difference to me personally, but a lot of music theorists certainly find that intriguing. I first had this song as a high-end okay, but then realized that it does have a lot of good moments to make it good. Now, while it's on the lower end of good, this song is certainly a nice hidden gem and begins the long stream of pessimistic songs from John Lennon in future albums.
That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want. Yeah. That's what I want.
Finally, we conclude this album with Money, That's What I Want, which is the last cover here. To put it simply, this is basically the twist and shout of this album. My favorite vocals are from John and Paul when they scream just because it releases so much energy into the song. They did that with Twist and Shout and it worked, so they did it here again. Musically, I really have to say the guitar work here was pretty fantastic, alongside that double-tracked piano. So is the conclusion of this album a good song? Definitely. It's not as good as Twist and Shout, but still finishes the album pretty strong. The most unique part of the song, though, is the progression. It starts off pretty relaxed, but once it reaches the halfway point, things really start to get good. The vocals and instrumentals get better and better as the song improves, and once John and Paul release their screams, the song just elevates. The bigger picture, though, is that the song just wraps up one of the best album showcasing covers that I've ever heard. Certainly a fantastic album closer.
I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand.
Before I wrap up this album, it's time to talk about the famous I Wanna Hold Your Hand single. Starting off with, well, I Wanna Hold Your Hand. The vocal highlight is definitely the ending of the bridge, where McCartney and Lennon belt out I Can't Hide as the instrumental energy just intensifies. Musically, the guitar work is phenomenal here. It starts the song off with a great hook before just blending with Lennon McCartney's vocals. It's impossible not to call this song good. It's honestly one of the most energetic songs I've ever heard. It truly defines what made the early Beatles a fantastic group. It's so brilliant in almost every aspect. Now the vocals here jump out at you and have that same effect as in She Loves You, where they pump you up. The musicianship is just plain exciting here. The sequence in the bridge at the end in the song adds to the buildup of energy. Now the lyrics, while not too impressive, does reach out to the fans and certainly made them feel connected. The song overall is just legendary, and it's no surprise why this was such a big hit. While the song may be simple, its impact on the band certainly cannot be forgotten.
That boy took my love away.
Last up is the B-side, This Boy, written by John Lennon. The vocal highlight here was really tough because almost everything shines here. The harmonies which were shared between Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison, which makes it the first Beatles song to have that trio's harmonies, really shine throughout the song. However, Lennon's vocals during the bridge are just simply too good. His range is displayed when he glides up to pretty tall heights vocally. I can also really hear the pain in his voice, which is definitely one of the best parts of the song. Many songs like Misery don't actually convey the pain the singer feels, which I think really prevents them from being personal, but this song does quite the opposite. You can definitely hear the pain that John Lennon's feeling here. Musically, it's similar to All My Loving, where the rhythm guitar work is at its best. The song is definitely good, and many factors contribute to that. Going back to the harmonies for a second, when it comes to best harmonies in music, a lot of people think Beach Boys. I did say in the Queen video that they had the best harmonies, but songs like this song really make it difficult to keep that opinion. The first time I heard this song, I was definitely blown away by those harmonies. Combined with those other great things like the rhythm guitar work, the downbeat lyrics, and Lennon's vocal performance, this song is beyond amazing. On a good day, I'd actually consider this song better than I Wanna Hold Your Hand. Only a good day, of course, though. And that was With the Beatles, along with the 2 songs released in between albums. So how did this album do? Well, slightly worse than Please Please Me, but that doesn't mean this album was bad. In fact, from top to bottom, it's still a great album. 12 of the 14 songs were good, which still matched Please Please Me. Personally though, I feel the covers in this song were what saved it. Each cover was done in a unique and fantastic way and certainly showed off the Beatles' ability to add their own flair to songs. Now what put this album under Please Please Me though was that it really had the only bad Beatles song so far, which was Little Child. Also, there were a lot of good songs that barely managed to make the cut at the low end of good. Songs like I Wanna Be Your Man, Not a Second Time, and even Don't Bother Me are probably songs that really only stand out on this album rather than the discography as a whole. Now there might be a reason for why this album at times felt underwhelming, which I'll get to in the observations. Now this album might not be memorable in most people's eyes, but there are certainly songs, especially from side 1, that will always be classics. So now here are the album rankings so far, and it's really not much because I've only reviewed 2 albums. But as you can see, Please Please Me is still on top of With the Beatles. And now here are the song rankings, which has I Wanna Hold Your Hand topping She Loves You as the best Beatles song so far. We still have a long way to go, so these are obviously going to change. Now let's get into the observations I made during this album. First off were the amazing covers. This album was just propelled by the covers. While none of them really surpassed Twist and Shout from Please Please Me quality wise, they all came pretty darn close. My personal favorites were Please Mr. Postman, Till There Was You, and Money. The other 3 were also solid, so the Beatles did a great job here with the covers. Second are the filler songs. Now, the way to tell if a song is filler is if it really doesn't bring anything new to the table, or if it just sounds rushed. This album in particular had 5 filler songs. I know that because Paul McCartney admitted it himself in various interviews. However, only 2 of those 5 songs turned out to be mediocre or bad. I think after the first 3 Lennon-McCartney original songs, they kind of ran into a wall and as a result, kind of pushed out some lackluster material. The shocking part is though, this album isn't the only Beatles album that's gonna do this. I won't spoil the next album to do this, but just keep that in mind, as they will have this problem again. However, the filler songs here really didn't hurt the album that much because not only were all 6 of the covers great, but the first 3 Lennon-McCartney songs were classics. 2 of the 5 filler songs were also ones I personally liked, so there's that as well. Finally, let's talk about the songwriting, because even though I included that lyrics section in the highlights, some songs really didn't have that much. You may be thinking to yourself that the Beatles songwriting might perhaps be overrated, but remember, this was still the first year that they made it big. Just like any other artist, the Beatles would be influenced by other artists or their environment when they grew as songwriters. Right now, they don't really have any big influences that would force them to go above and beyond. But in a couple albums, I think you'll start to see them really grow as songwriters. Maybe even as soon as the next album. The appeal for the songs we've listened to so far has definitely been the sound though. Like I said, they might not be intelligent lyrically, but you cannot deny how great most of these songs have sounded so far. So that does it for With the Beatles. Next time it'll be a Hard Day's Night as we tackle on the Beatles' first film and its soundtrack.